mind. Okay. So welcome once again to this important discussion on engaging government stakeholders in prioritizing women's safety. We have a great lineup for you. This event is brought to you in partnership with Red Dot Foundation and the Center for Protecting Women Online, which is based at the Open University UK. And we are hosting this event on the sidelines of the Commission of the Status of Women, which is currently taking place in New York. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Olga, and she will tell you a little bit more about the center.
Thank you very much, Elsa, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to also learn that so many of you are joining not only directly on Zoom but also are watching this event being live streamed. As always, it's a pleasure to co-organize just about anything with Elsa. So today we're bringing you this event, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to briefly talk about the Center for Protecting Women Online. My colleague, Dr. Ksenia Bakina, will be speaking later, and I'm sure she will go in much greater detail about some of the work we're doing. But we are a research center based at the Open University in the UK, and our focus is women's online safety. We are the only unit that has cross-disciplinary focus on women's online safety. Some of the disciplines represented in the center are law and policy, policing, psychology, computer science, and software engineering. We also are very lucky to have attracted a number of international visiting fellows who very much enrich the work of the center and what we do. Our aim is to reduce harms to women online. That's pretty much the top line of what we do day in, day out. And the theme of today's event is very much relevant to one of the core activities of the center, and that is engaging governmental stakeholders in informing policy, in trying to pave the way towards better protections for women online, but also better protections for women in the aftermath of violence that they experience. So this is absolutely a brilliant forum to discuss this pressing issue, and I'm really delighted with the lineup that we have today. I think we are in for a fantastic session. So I don't want to take any more of your time, but I do want to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Sylwia Spurek, who is former member of the European Parliament and also former Deputy High Commissioner of Poland. And Sylwia very kindly agreed to give up her time today and join us on this event to share her really deep knowledge and wealth of experience in engaging governmental stakeholders, particularly around issues surrounding violence against women and girls, both online and offline. Sylwia, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for accepting our invite, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning in Washington, D.C., and thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'm going to share with you my experiences on advocacy work, drafting and adopting crucial laws on combating violence against women at national and European level. 5 experiences, precisely speaking. In 1999, I started my human rights defender work in NGO. I provided women experiencing domestic violence with free of charge legal help. This experience has accompanied me in every role, every public position I have had. And I will never forget our conversations, their cases, their struggle. And I widely referred to this experience when I drafted the first Polish law on counteracting domestic violence in 2003. So this is the first experience. And I was shocked when Polish Minister of Justice and Minister of Internal Affairs of the democratic left-wing government didn't agree to include progressive provisions in the law, restraining and eviction orders in particular. Currently, Polish law includes such provisions, but it took 20 years and many amendments to the law. And the application and execution of the law is far from perfection. It means this lack of awareness, the lack of knowledge on domestic violence that was a barrier to adopt decent law at that time is a barrier now to execute the law from the victim's perspective. And second experience, in 2014, I coordinated the government process of the ratification of the Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence by Poland. And that time, firstly, the ratification process was suspended because some people thought the convention was about so-called gender ideology. The convention, and it goes without saying, is about saving women's lives. And there is no such thing like gender ideology. And secondly, after its ratification, Polish Prime Minister submitted a motion to the Constitutional Court claiming the convention violates Polish constitution. The motion finally was withdrawn by the government after the election. But the convention is still to be fully implemented in Poland. And when I was a Deputy Commissioner for Human Rights, this is the third experience, I addressed issues on implementation of the convention on a regular basis, draw the government attention to the limitations and gaps of the Polish law. But only minor changes were made. And this is the last experience and the major one. In 2019, I decided to enter politics. I became a member of the European Parliament and vice chair of the FAM committee. I entered politics because I wanted to be more efficient. I wanted to stop asking, requesting, claiming. I wanted to be a part of the decision-making process. And I had two goals. First goal was to ensure the European Union would ratify the Istanbul Convention. The convention was signed in 2017, but the process was blocked by member states. The second goal was to ensure violence against women would be added to the catalogue of so-called EU crimes in the treaty. This is crucial because this is a legal basis for the EU to adopt laws. And in June 2019, just after the election, I met Ursula von der Leyen, the candidate and the future president of the European Commission. I talked to her with my goals. I presented her my goals, and in her address to the European Parliament, Ursula von der Leyen declared she would propose to add violence against women to the list of EU crimes defined in the treaty, and she underlined the European Union should ratify the Istanbul Convention. But again, nothing happened. We addressed a few letters to Ursula symbolically within 16 days against violence against women, reminding her the promises she had made. One of the lists was signed by more than 50,000 Polish women and men. Finally, in 2023, the EU ratified the convention, but it took 5 years since its signing and 4 years since Ursula's declaration. And violence against women has not been added to the catalogue of EU crimes. It has affected the process of adoption of the first EU law on combating violence against women, unfortunately, because in 2022, the Commission published its proposal for the Directive on Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. I was one of the rapporteurs of the proposal in the European Parliament, and we submitted dozens of progressive amendments. Unfortunately, during so-called trialogues, this is interinstitutional negotiations between European Parliament, the Council, and the Commission, many provisions were watered down because of the Council position, the governments of Germany and France in particular. Example, the criminalization of rape was removed from the directive. Can you imagine the law on combating violence against women without combating rape? But President Macron and Chancellor Scholz didn't agree to include rape in the directive. They claimed there is no legal basis to that. The directive was finally adopted in May 2024. It criminalizes at EU level certain forms of violence against women offline and online, and requires member states to adopt measures of prevention, protection, and support of victims, of coordination and cooperation between authorities. But it falls far short of the historic step forward in the fight against gender-based violence, not only because of the rape case. Another example, cyber violence. Cyber stalking and harassment, the non-consensual sharing of intimate images online, should only be considered criminal offenses when such actions, quote, are likely to cause serious psychological harm. So there is no crime if you can't prove serious psychological harm, and such limitation can severely violate the protection of the victim and their access to justice. Why this is important? You can say every person active on the internet can experience cyber violence in the internet to some extent. But cyber violence against women is different as regards to the nature, roots, extent, and consequences. My research conducted in 2024 shows almost 40% of women in Poland experienced violence in the internet. Research conducted by NGOs, academics, United Nations, and European Union shows similar or even higher numbers at the European level and globally, and indicates, this is interesting, women are more afraid of experiencing abuse online than in real life. And female activists, artists, politicians, journalists, businesswomen, human rights defenders are at increased risk. We can say online violence against women is just a new face of an old enemy, violence that women experience because they are women, at home, on the street, at work. This kind of violence is a tool of control, of punishment, and silencing women. This form of violence results in health issues. Women limit their online activities, delete their social media accounts, and withdraw from public discourse. These are only selected examples of how cyber violence influences women's lives, their human rights, and the quality of democracy. It's high time to address this in the legislation, but the directive would not be an efficient tool. And to conclude, I have learned two lessons from my human rights journey. First, we all met and we will meet enemies of women's rights. We will meet false allies. We will meet people that lack the knowledge that affects the process of adoption and execution of the law. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't do our job. It means we need to look for real allies. We need to network. We need to search for synergies. And I think this is important. We need to make people aware that you are either on the side of the victim or on the side of the perpetrator. If you think you are neutral, you actually protect the abuser. Your silence, your abstention is the acceptance of the violence. And second, everything is about the law, including legislation, including education, raising awareness, training of professionals, and responsibilities of technology companies and social media platforms are about the law. We can't leave these issues out of the scope of the legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylwia. That was excellent, and really, it's been really enriching to hear about these experiences. I think there are clearly some themes that came out of your keynote that I just wanted to draw on a little bit. I think once kind of lawyer to lawyer, 100% agree. There is no such thing as neutrality when it comes to violence against women and girls. It is a very clearly not a neutral problem. It is a huge societal problem with immense and widespread implications that actually also transgress generations. It's very easy to sometimes think about certain legislation, being drafted to address an issue that is happening here and now, but actually there is a long-term impact of that legislation that perhaps we are yet to see. And you've drawn on some great examples. I think the first example you gave was from 2003 and the domestic violence law. So we are 22 years on, and I think perhaps we're only now starting to see the effects of that, and still perhaps have our reservations as to whether this is the best law we could have in place to protect victims of domestic abuse. In your talk, you also mentioned about the need to draft progressive laws, and I couldn't agree more. I think so often it's so disheartening to see laws that lack ambition, that lack research evidence, despite, I think, wealth of research now out there on various forms of violence against women and girls. And an important thing that you, I think, teased out really nicely in your talk was the fact that you cannot make assumptions. You cannot make assumptions that liberal politicians are automatically your allies. Perhaps there is a good chance of that happening, but assumptions are not the way to go. And I think what I really liked as well is your emphasis on the need to seek allies and to network, because it is a huge problem. You talked about cyber violence. It is a problem that does not quite stick to geographic boundaries. So I'm a firm believer that the solutions to this problem are not going to come from necessarily certain domestic legislation, but actually very much a cross-border, cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral collaboration to really tackle this really multifold problem. And I think, speaking of networks, it's fantastic to already be connected to, people like ElsaMarie and Red Dot Foundation, who are doing absolutely amazing job in advocating for change and taking meaningful steps forward to actually provide various stakeholders with data, because data is one of the things that we still do not have enough of, or reliable data, when it comes to actually using it for policy influence, when it comes to violence against women and girls. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to ElsaMarie to talk about amazing work that Red Dot is doing in that space. And thank you once again, Sylwia, for this really thought-provoking keynote. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Sylwia, for the amazing keynote and the history of how people have been pushing for change and how much effort it takes to push for change, and change doesn't happen in an instant. And yet, you build on past work. So we continuously have to keep that going. I want to share a little bit about Red Dot Foundation's work. So I'm going to share a video with you that'll help explain it a bit. And then we are going to jump into another conversation with two amazing government leaders. Okay. I am trying to share my video. Can you hear? Okay. My name is ElsaMarie DSilva, and I founded the Safe City app. Safe City is an app that allows for women to report incidents of gender-based violence. That data is collected, organized, and distributed, helping women to make safer choices in their cities. Through the Vital Voices Network, the Safe City app has expanded to 12 countries.
Hi, I'm Maya Tamayo. We are based in Quezon City, Philippines. We have appreciated the value of a technology like the Safe City app, wherein we are given crucial data. One of our signature programs is the Fellowship for Elected Women Mayors, Vice Mayors, Councilors around the Philippines. When we discussed the application, they realized that gender-based violence is a crime against the community and not only among the individual persons. We want policy reforms that would actually help women achieve gender justice. For us, this is really the way forward. I'm Samara Castro. I'm from Brazil. We have the same situation in Brazil like other countries. We have a lot of violence and we don't have a lot of information. So I try to connect different organizations with the Safety City app and show how it's important we have this kind of collective action.
My name is Diana Nyango. I'm from Kibera in Nairobi, Kenya. Creating a safe space for young girls to have someone to talk to is very, very important. And when Elsa shared about the app, I loved it so much because initially I'd started a platform we call the Talking Boxes. Talking Boxes is about installing boxes in schools and encouraging kids to write whatever they want to share and they put into the boxes. And then we organize forums for these girls to talk about themselves. Sexual harassment. In Kibera, not everyone have access to mobile phones. So with the Safe City app, we have to get a way of collecting reports. So we use the talking boxes. This app has helped us to provide data for national review reporting. People within the communities, they are connecting reality to research. And that is the only way that we are going to have sustainable development.
Collective action is the only way that we can push the needle and make a difference. Great. So, you've seen three examples of our work in very different settings. In the Philippines, Maya Tamayo is actually in the room. So please say hi, Maya, and share your details. Also, some of your counselors are also here. So please say hi. Samara Castro is from the Brazilian government and invited us to map the intersection of gender-based violence and climate change, which was a new aspect for us. And there's been a lot of learning since we started the project last year. Luis Cardoso, who's from my team in Brazil, is here. Maybe you can put a link to the research that has come out from there. And of course, very grassroots organizations in Kibera also have been using it to engage religious leaders, urban planners, but also submitting inputs to the VNR of the country. VNRs are voluntary reporting by the country on how they are performing on SDGs. So we can engage with government at all levels. And now to help me unpack this, how do government look at this issue and how do they work with community-based stakeholders? I have two very interesting guests. One is Rakesh Arya. He is the police commissioner of Panchkula in Haryana, India. Welcome, Rakesh. And we have JC Balonkita, who is the Senior Transport Development Officer from the Department of Transportation in the Philippines. So welcome both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elsa.
Hi.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you both a common question. First of all, thank you for your service and thank you for being entrepreneurial. I call it entrepreneurs within government who want to make a difference, who want to make a change and who are not afraid to try out new things and be innovative. So from your point of view, how can government and community work together to promote women's safety and make spaces safer? Because really it is of global pandemic proportions. So it's not an easy issue to solve. So maybe Rakesh, would you like to go first and then JC?
Sure. Thank you very much, Elsa. Hello, everyone, once again. So just to give you some background, I personally know Elsa and her work, at least for last 7 years now. We have been engaging in some form or the other in terms of creating awareness and training police personnel wherever I have been posted for last 6-7 years. But recently, even I was posted in Faridabad, Commissioner Police Faridabad. We engaged in many ways. Formally, we actually kind of had a memorandum of understanding to understand how can we create safer cities in Haryana, More specifically, how can we create or make Faridabad a better city to live with, particularly for women? So, with this background, we started the Safe City survey with them. So, it certainly helped us in many, many ways. First of all, the survey or the whatever insights we got from them, it helps us in policy making in terms of like it gave us the third party review of our work or the work already being done by law enforcement, by our police teams on the ground to make women or feel them safer. And then we had another thing like when they completed their survey, the initial baseline survey to begin with. So we saw that there is a lot of gap in terms of data. Whatever crime has been reported to us and what actually was happening or is happening, if we can call it incidence of crimes against women. So there was a huge gap. We tried to understand the reasons for that. The gap was for many reasons, like crimes were happening sometime. They didn't know where to reach, whom to reach out, how to report it to the police personnel. At times, there was a problem of mindset also. Our people also used to wish them away. Like nothing has happened. Maybe you don't have any evidence for that. So all these kind of things were there. And thirdly, they gave us a new perspective in terms of interventions. What all interventions can we make? Like initially, we just used to what we used to do that we just used to enhance the police presence or patrolling in that particular area. But we understood when we understood the issues in detail, then we found out the various reasons of those crimes happening in various areas where the survey was done. So one of the major issue which came to light was like lack of proper lighting, street lighting on roads, in parks, particularly the vulnerable areas. So we have been also able to identify the hot routes and also the vulnerable times for women or the vulnerable places. Moreover, there was another thing which came to light was there was absence of transportation or transport services for women, particularly during odd hours. And the students who have been attending to late evening classes or maybe coaching, so they didn't have all those facilities and they were susceptible or vulnerable to all kinds of crimes against women, including eve teasing and staring and whatnot. So with this data and with this information, we have been able to more meaningfully, we have been able to engage other stakeholder departments like municipal corporations, transport, and general other women in child development more meaningfully, supported by data, statistics, and the interventions, if are made along with police presence, then what kind of impact these intervention can have on sense of security or safety amongst women. Because many a times, rather than actual crimes happening, how are they feeling? How the women in general or the females who are attending to schools and colleges, how do they feel when they step out of the house or when they move back to their place after attending to their office or schools or college or tuitions? So then we were able to engage more meaningfully and constructively, and we were able to also fix accountability in terms of the like which department was supposed to do what. So all of us came together and it became a multiplier effect on whatever interventions we had. So the entire process created a lot of awareness amongst the masses. So now they also started giving us information, reaching out to police in many ways. They became the eyes and ears of the police. So they started reporting and they felt more and more confident. Then okay, these are the platforms or the facilities you have. You can make a call on 112, which is a toll-free number. You can reach out to the local police station. And also, you can not only report crimes to if unfortunately happens to themselves, but also if they see that crime happening. So on those things also, we took a lot of action. And moreover, uh, formal training was done for our own men and women who were on duty in the field. So including sensitization. So they were trained how to empathize with the victims of such crimes and how they should actually deal with them, counsel them, and encourage them to come forward and make complaints. So with this experience and like we became really confident, and now we have been we are extending it to 8 other districts of Haryana, and we are trying to make those cities also much safer and better for our women and also other vulnerable sections of society. So I think we had been like, it was a great experience so far, and emboldened by the experience and the positive outcomes and the feedback from the society, from the common people, our own men and the politicians. Now we are taking it to phase 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Rakesh, for that. You know, whenever I hear the updates from this project, I'm always very heartened because, you know, sometimes we don't even know the impact that is being unfolding in front of our eyes. And like you said, from one district, now we are extending it to 8 other districts, and more police commissioners and the Director General of Police for the state is also on board. And I'm often asked, where is the pushback that you get from the safe city data being in the public domain? And I always say that actually I've had only a good experience in India with the police, with city officials. We have a similar project in the south of India in Chennai, where government actually wants this data, even if it's anonymous, even if it is crowdsourced, because they recognize that there is a gap and that they want to make a difference. And without this data, they are running blind in a way. And the other place outside of India that I've had the most positive experience has actually been in the Philippines and also Brazil. Like I said, the request came directly from the government. So the Philippines has been very, very proactive on women's safety. We've had the mayor of Quezon City, Mayor Joy, much beloved mayor. Usually we have her on our panel, but it's so late in the Philippines. And we also wanted to bring in a different sector of government, which is transport, to share about how they view women's safety and how do they see technology like Safe City adding value to their efforts in making transport safer. So JC, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yes, good evening, and thank you everyone for having me here. Yeah, so before we start po, actually, I'm by profession kasi I'm an architect, no? And is our forte here in Department of Transportation. So for this, we just wanted to share what we are currently planning, no? Or planned the projects way back 2019. So our principles in our designs, in the new designs that we are implementing in the railway sector is based on data. Before, it was just people-centric. So it was just for the commuters. But 5 years ago, we conducted some grievance redress mechanisms in our stakeholders. And we found out that much of our commuters or some of the incidents are not reported. So based on that data, it's very, very minimal that reports are coming to us, and we don't know how to mitigate that. So we did in our 5 years in the transport sector, we've conducted some research, some data gathering, and we're using this data to revise the designs and the transportation systems that we have right now. So for example, before our elevators our elevators are has barriers, no, it cannot be seen, it's not transparent. So gender-based violence are usually happens inside elevators and escalators, and usually there are blind spots inside the transportation systems that our CCTV does not cover. So us as the operators, we don't know where those blind spots are. And with that, with this application, with data gathering, with this modern technology, we can now know where are the where potential hotspots of GBV or gender-based violence can occur during the operational hours. No? Last year, we have conducted a series of uh, uh, stakeholder coordination, no? And some of these stakeholders are public commuters, no? So it's an open forum for all of our commuters to join. And with our coordination with them, we have developed this TFDS, our Transit Facilities Design Manual, that we're currently being implemented on all the railway portfolio. So it's a big leap forward for the security in our transportation systems. Before, it was non-existent. Before, we rely only on our security personnel and our uniform personnel. But now, with this gathered data, we can continually improve and we can identify where in the specific areas that we need to improve on. So it comes very later in the operations and maintenance of our transportation systems. Yeah, I think that's that's all I can share for the transportation systems for now.
Yeah, thank you. So as you said, JC, you're an architect and you bring that lens. And, you know, in architecture school, there's a lot of design principles for good urban planning, right? And yet there are blind spots in our city. Some of it can be improved by lighting, but also I think having a more involved public also helps to gather this kind of data, to inform, to be better bystanders. And there are a host of interventions that we can actually deploy if we only knew when, where, and what was the problem. So, yeah, I think both your interventions were great. Since this is also a technology themed session, I wanted to ask you, Rakesh and JC, how can technology help you in doing your work better, but also how can we make it more gender sensitive so that it is not used badly or to further harm? As Sylwia mentioned, you know, all the interventions that we are talking about is really to reduce the harm. So Rakesh, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, in terms of investigation or collecting evidence, if I talk little in terms of our professional work, technology helps us gather, collect, and also produce a lot of technical or digital evidences. Because nowadays we have, like, when women complain of some crime happening against them, so always there used to be, but now not that much. There used to be a kind of counter. What evidences do they have? It has become a kind of practice to misuse the law or to extort money from the uh, perpetrators of crime. But now with this technology or digital world, in most of the cases we have been able to collect or gather some evidences, good evidences, which makes a really good headway for us during the investigation. And if we talk in terms of prevention of crime, because we have been propagating and also getting it done not only through government agencies like municipal corporations, but from public-private partnership, roping in NGOs, corporates, by getting the CCTVs installed at strategic locations. We also do our own hotspotting. And as I mentioned while I was talking about our experience in Faridabad, so we got those hot routes and hotspots. Now, Haryana government is also considering putting CCTV cameras in each and every Haryana roadways transport services, also all the buses. So installing CCTV cameras, having the centralized command and control systems where we have audio and videos placed at strategic locations, crossings, public parks, where we can directly interact or communicate with the people. We have this technology in Faridabad, I would like to mention, where we had the access of videos of important parks, particularly during evening hours. Our people used to sit there and watch boys coming, standing, staring, stalking. So, and then we had the audio also there. So we could straight away tell them from the right from our control rooms, hey guy, this person standing with this bike number, this, what are you doing here? Please go away, otherwise action will be taken against you. So technology has come really, really, really far. So on bigger cities, we have been able to use it. So far, we have like four cities. We have this integrated command and control system we have been able to install as smart city project. But slowly and gradually, we are extending it to other districts also, particularly the district headquarters or the range headquarters. So with gradual, or rather I would say effective intervention and uses of technology, we can make our cities much, much safer. It creates a lot of information, provides data, which is stored for a year or at times for 2 years. So we can always dig in, we can identify the perpetrators. If we have smallest of the clue, or we can develop it, we have been able to do in many cases. We just had this information that this vehicle passed from this road around that time. So we had that, like, all the cameras have been mapped. So we just did that census. And in time wise, we calculated all the details. If from this road, when vehicle passes, after how many minutes, on an average, this vehicle would reach there or should pass through that particular road. So that's how we had been able to connect the criminal or the vehicle's movement, and have been able to prove, or actually prove, and got the in many cases of crime, but also detection, as well as putting the, or like ensuring justice to the victim. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's a really cool way of using technology, not just for evidence, but also for prevention. And I always love that example of the CCTV cameras being used as an audio to alert that there is somebody watching you. So please don't perpetrate the crime. So thank you for that.
Yeah, actually, because in Hindi, in Bollywood movies also, you also must have heard कि पुलिस क्राइम होने के बाद पहुंचती है. So this was one feature. This was one intervention where we intervene before the crime happens or during the happening of the crime, so that we can effectively prevent it. Or if the people still persist on doing the same thing, then police vehicle will reach and take care of them.
Thank you. Thank you. So
Yeah.
what Rakesh said in Bollywood movies,
Thank you.
it's always said that the police arrives after the crime takes place. But with this, they are able to tell people that we are watching. I mean, surveillance has its pros and cons, but I think this is a good way of using it, where you're saying we are watching, and if you don't stop it, we are going to come there in 5 minutes or whatever. So it deters people from the crime. JC, would you like to quickly give your intervention, and please address Marvin's questions in the chat?
Okay, wait. It's a lot of questions pala. Oh, will I first address the question of Sir Marvin, or okay?
Yeah, maybe you can just go ahead, because we've also covered some smart city
Okay.
stuff over there. Yeah.
All right. Actually, this is related naman to his question. Technology can help us in redefining spatial design in transportation systems. So before, we're relying on national standards and international standards, but we don't have really a direct connection with our stakeholders, with our passengers. So with this data, we can use the information to help us guide new design in station planning. Ayan. So, and number two, we can also use the technology in our public communications plan with the passengers. And we can integrate IEC materials, campaign materials in the application. And so that we can inform our passengers what our policies are and our existing laws. So that, for example, yung mga safe spaces app that we are currently implementing, for now it's just in a tarpaulin, but maybe in the future we can integrate it with this digital application or in technologies that are available to us in the future. And number three, probably one proposal is we can integrate this technology as part of our grievance redress mechanism. Because usually in government projects, we have a limited resource, limited funding. And by using third-party applications, we can multiply our grievance redress mechanism throughout the
I think your video is lagging.
the city.
Yeah, I think you
finally,
have a little bit of a
yes, I'm sorry.
lag. Yeah.
It's a little bit unstable. Yeah. So is it okay now? Or? Yeah, and finally, we can use technology in early reporting of incidents and cases referral. No? This is our first barrier in security before we turn over these cases to our authorities. So, yeah.
Great.
Probably I can answer the...
Yeah. You can put it in the chat because we are running out of time. There's so much to talk about, and it's such an interesting conversation, and we have such amazing leaders. But what I'm taking out of it is it takes a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary approach to solving this problem. And it takes engagement with all levels of government to make sure that we have a safer, inclusive community, city, country, and the world. So thank you so much, Rakesh and JC. Thank you for your work and for your collaboration and partnership. We are very happy to be, part of this ecosystem of amazing people who have a bigger purpose and who are using their positions of influence and power to make the world a better place. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm now going to pass it on to Ksenia Bakina, who is going to take us through an interesting presentation on her area of expertise.
Thank you so much, ElsaMarie. First of all, a huge thank you for inviting me to this event. It's a great honor to be here among so much expertise across the entire world. And I'm just going to try and share my presentation, and hopefully you are able to see this. So if I press on this, is this visible to all of you? I can see it. I hope that you can see this as well. Yeah, brilliant. So as already been mentioned, my name is Ksenia. I'm a research fellow and a stream lead for law and policy stream at the Center for Protecting Women Online. But also my background involves working for human rights organizations. So today I wanted to talk to you about sort of unpacking image-based sexual abuse and how responses to image-based sexual abuse have evolved as our understanding of this has evolved as well. And this has shaped the way stakeholders played a huge part in developing legislative responses. And at the end, I will also wrap up with maybe going a little bit beyond image-based sexual abuse and talking about online violence against women in general, and outlining some projects that the center is currently working on as well. So just to recap, Olga has already introduced the center, but I just want to tell you a little bit more about it. It is, as been mentioned, a cross-disciplinary research center. which brings together researchers from law and policy, psychology, computing, software engineering, and policing. And it was formed in 2024, and it's been awarded 7.7 million grant by Research England. And it is the first centre of its kind in the UK and potentially in Europe, because not only does it focus on online harms and online violence, it specifically looks at the way women and girls are being targeted by online abuse. So we really hope that it will become a vehicle for understanding, addressing challenges posed to women's online safety through an interdisciplinary research agenda. And as I've mentioned, it has numerous streams, including law and policy, policing, responsible AI, responsible tech, and human behavior, as well as regulations. And the aim is to minimize antisocial behavior, as well as help build technology and software to ensure accountability, credibility, and facilitate justice. And we have extensive research, extensive publications, which are all available on our website. So please do take a look, as you'll be able to find a lot of information about the work that we do there. And we also have an extensive list of partners, which currently I think around over 30 partners, which include local organizations, as we're based in Milton Keynes. So it's organizations such as MK Act, Foresight Society. There are UK-based charities such as Refuge, End Violence Against Women Coalition, White Ribbon, and of course there are also global organizations such as Red Dot Foundation and Deloitte. So as has already been mentioned, we don't just focus on evidence gathering and conducting academic research. We really hope that our work has a real impact in society and in the world. And as a result, we are playing a role in influencing policy and international standards. So, for example, the Council of Europe set up a committee of experts on combating technology-facilitated violence against women and girls in 2024, which looks at a comprehensive approach to technology-facilitated violence in Europe and beyond. And we're really happy that the Centre and our director, Professor Olga Jurasz, is a member of the Council of Europe Committee of Experts. And in addition to this, we do also engage currently with the UK government and provide our input and our expertise on development of new strategy targeting violence against women and girls. As well as we always seek opportunities to respond to numerous consultations and calls for evidence from UK and international organizations. We've recently responded to a consultation from the UK College of Policing on data ethics and the use of data-driven technologies in policing. We've also responded to a consultation by Public Accounts Committee on tackling online violence against women, and to the UN Human Rights Council Advisory Committee on technology-facilitated gender-based violence. And all of these responses are also going to be published on our website shortly. So I want to start unpacking a little bit image-based sexual abuse and how it's evolved and developed over the last 10 years. So I'm sure most of you already know that image abuse is an umbrella term, and it includes a wide range of behaviors. And the list I've outlined on the slide is a not exhaustive list, but it's generally understood to include behaviors such as non-consensual creation or sharing of intimate images, threats to share, create such images, as well as collection of non-consensual images, as well as deep fakes, down blousing or upskirting, so taking images of intimate areas down the woman's blouse or under the skirt, as well as cyber flashing, which includes sending unwanted dick pics to people. There's voyeurism, such as recording of private acts or observation of those acts without consent, as well as sextortion, which includes blackmail through the use of intimate images. And there's Zoom bombing or flashing, which involves either flashing genitals or engaging in sexual acts without the consent of other people that might be on a Zoom call or on a WhatsApp call. So this is the understanding we have today, that it's a broad term which encompasses a whole range of behaviors. However, when this issue first came to our attention over 10 years ago, the understanding of image-based sexual abuse was rather limited. And as a result, when the first law was enacted in England and Wales, which was found in sections 33 to 35 of the Criminal Justice and Courts Act, its spectrum was really quite limited, because in a similar way that Sylwia explained, that legislation required proof to show psychological harm, this particular act in the UK criminalized sharing private sexual images, provided that it could be shown that those images were shared to cause distress. And this ultimately meant that it couldn't capture all of the perpetrators that potentially didn't have that intention, or could argue that they did it as a joke or they did it to make money. So people like hackers may have fallen through that legislation and would not be caught by it. It also didn't apply to threats to distribute private sexual images. And crucially, it didn't apply to digitally manipulated photos or deepfakes, as well as numerous types of intimate images, such as images of a woman breastfeeding or culturally intimate images as well. And I think this is part of the reason that, for me, shows the necessity for stakeholders to engage with governmental bodies, both before, during, and after any legislative attempt or is made to tackle a specific behavior, or any strategy addressing specific types of harm is made. Because when I analyzed the debates in Parliament, the misunderstandings of this offence became really quite apparent, because back in 2015, 2014, this type of behaviour was just termed revenge pornography. And so when this behaviour was debated in Parliament, a lot of focus was, well, on the revenge aspect. So this meant that revenge obviously implies that there must be a need to show humiliation, distress, or some sort of alarm. And a lot of focus was also on ex-partners being the perpetrators, because it was revenge pornography. It was ex-partners who were distributing these images to harm their ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. And as a result, there was no discussion on the responsibility of the hosting platforms, of what they should be doing in taking down these images. The focus was very much on the initial perpetrator doing the upload. And actually, digitally altered images or deepfakes during the debates were intentionally left out from this act, because it was suggested that the digitally altered images do not have the potential to cause as much harm as real life images. And of course, fast forward 10 years on, we know that the technological capabilities are such that it's virtually impossible to tell a difference between a digitally altered image and a real life image. We know that also AI technology is vastly available. Perhaps 10 years ago, you did require some sort of technological skills in order to be able to alter an images in a way that wasn't so obvious. But nowadays, there's a wide availability of nudify apps that will make anyone, that claim that they can make anyone look naked with a touch of a button. And also we know that anybody can be a victim, because only one image is required to create a realistic deep fake. This could be taken from platforms like LinkedIn or employers' platforms, and it causes substantial amount of harm in the same way that distribution of real-life images causes, including physical harm, psychological harm, reputational harm. It often silences women in politics and the media. It makes women feel powerless. It erodes their autonomy. It makes them feel that their body is not their own. Deepfakes are also very often used for sextortion. It also normalizes sexual abuse in society and enables abusive partners to use deepfakes to exercise further control and intimidate and entrap their victims. And of course, it violates victims' right to privacy and freedom of expression. So, as I've mentioned, the first criminal law was heavily criticized, and the reason there was a lot of changes actually took place was because survivors of image-based sexual abuse were coming to media, were approaching news outlets and telling their stories. We see a lot of stories after 2015 where survivors are saying, well, my situation was not captured by this law because I was targeted by hackers, and this law is focused more on ex-partners. Also, there were numerous reports in the news where at least 1 in 3 cases needed to be dropped because they couldn't establish the motivation of the perpetrator. There was a lack of anonymity, and there was an inability of the police to deal with these offenses effectively. Also, importantly, Revenge Porn Helpline was established around 2015, which also started sharing its reports and telling the society, the media, the governmental bodies about what the victims, how they were being affected, what were the trends in behaviors. And of course, academics and other CSOs raised a lot of concerns about the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, not 2025, as stated in my slides. And so the result of that, a lot of concern and engagement was that in 2019, the Law Commission in the UK, which is tasked with a review of criminal civil laws, began its review of the criminal law in relation to image-based sexual abuse. And the Law Commission also did a really wide period of consultation where they approached civil society organizations, they approached victim-centered organizations, as well as numerous academics, and asked them to feed in through their workshops, through submission of evidence, their views on what was wrong with current criminal legislation, where it was working in tackling image-based sexual abuse, and where it was really failing to address these issues. So its report was finally published in 2022, which highlighted numerous inconsistencies between the different types of images being covered. So, for instance, it found that it covered images such as upskirting, where a picture is taken underneath a woman's skirt, but it did not apply to down blousing, where a picture is taken down the woman's blouse, revealing cleavage. It also didn't apply to cultural intimate images. It didn't apply to intimate images of breastfeeding. And it again criticized this importance of having to establish intention to cause distress. It recommended that there should be automatic anonymity to survivors, and suggested the term intimate rather than sexual should be adopted. And in 2022, the UK government stated that they would be including some of the Law Commission's proposals in the development of the Online Safety Act 2023. So as a result of all of this engagement, a lot of this work that was undertaken, the Online Safety Act finally recognizes broader types of image-based sexual abuse. It covers breastfeeding, but it doesn't cover culturally intimate images. It also places it as priority offenses, so it treats it at the same kind of standard as potentially some terrorism and some child sexual abuse material as well. And crucially, it included dissemination of sexual deep fakes within its ambit. And finally, we're starting to pay some attention to not just the individual perpetrators, but also the duties of search services such as Google, social media companies, and messaging apps to mitigate the risk from illegal content. And it does put a duty to identify and take down image-based sexual abuse. So it also emphasizes that search engines, social media platforms, and messaging apps must prevent, identify, and protect users from those image-based sexual abuse acts that are covered in the Act. And Ofcom, as the regulator, is tasked with providing guidance for these platforms in relation to these offences. So we can already see that because a lot of this engagement and developing of our understanding, there has been some progress. However, of course, there are still a lot of gaps. The issue is far from resolved, because although there are some small wins in relation to developing of legislation, for instance, there's an offence now that does not require establishment of intent to cause distress, but merely needs to show that it's a non-consensual act. But it doesn't cover, it still gaps in terms of covering culturally intimate images, such as a Muslim woman being pictured without her hijab. Also, crucially, although there is starting to be, the focus is starting to shift to some platforms, there is no minimum standard for protection as set by this legislation. So there's no inclusion of safety by design, which ultimately means that platforms can adopt sort of very minimal protections. And whilst the Ofcom regulator has some powers, its powers are actually quite limited and are unlikely to have much impact on global platforms that with a huge turnover, because whilst they can make fines, the fines are limited and also can be appealed in the courts as well. And crucially, the Ofcom powers are not designed to help individuals to take their content down. They just set guidelines to platforms, and the chances of all these platforms standing in line and adopting all of the guidelines are pretty slim. And finally, the Online Safety Act does not include creation of sexualized deepfakes, although the UK government has announced recently that it will be addressing this gap as well. And through further engagement with stakeholders, just last week, Women's Equality Committee issued a report on tackling non-consensual intimate images. And it again suggests that a broader approach is adopted, that we need to take a holistic approach and to tackling this, and that we need an online safety commission to be set up, so that in a similar way that there's an e-safety commissioner in Australia, in the way to support individuals. So, again, as I've said, that there has definitely been progress in relation to image-based sexual abuse over the last 10 years. However, that progress is still limited, and we're still fighting for some for acceptance of culturally intimate images, support for individuals, and stronger guidelines and stronger actions from hosting platforms themselves. But of course, none of this that has already been achieved would have been available without effective stakeholder engagement. And I just wanted to highlight some recent campaigns that have been quite successful. So, for example, Glamour UK magazine, which is quite a famous women's magazine in the UK, has partnered with End Violence Against Women Coalition, as well as Not Your Porn organization, and numerous academics to draw attention to image-based sexual abuse and the fact that it needs to be stopped. And this was a really effective campaign, because they've had a list of very clear asks. And of course, by being spread across a very popular women's magazine, the public took a lot of notice to this campaign. And there were other campaigns with charities such as Glitch and Refuge, who campaigned together with telecom operator EE to include women and girls within the Online Safety Act 2023. And of course, none of this could have been achieved without survivors speaking out about their lived experiences, talking to the media, and grabbing headlines and grabbing attention to make sure that the public understood the broad, the spectrum of image-based sexual abuse. And recently, we've actually had a representative from the End Violence Against Women Coalition come to the center and tell us about their successful campaign with Glamour. And they've outlined some of the ways in which they engage with government bodies. And this has resonated with me quite a lot, because a lot of this I've also done whilst working for human rights organizations. And so it's really important to focus on lobbying the politicians, both national and international, such as members of European Parliament, that have spoken out about the issues of image-based sexual abuse or online violence against women. And of course, also, it's really important to prepare coherent research reports and evidence that could be utilized not only by the governmental bodies, but also by the media. For example, our director, Professor Olga Jurasz, last year launched a really extensive study, which is called 4 Nations Study, which assessed impact and spectrum of online violence against women across the 4 nations in the UK. And that was such a huge piece of work and such an informative piece of work that not only the governmental bodies were interested in this, but also a lot of media was covered this as well, to really deepen the understanding of the breadth of the problem of online violence against women. And as I've mentioned, it's important to submit evidence and respond to consultation in both national and international organizations, as well as effective campaigns that might involve members of the public, because once members of the public become aware of certain issues, they want to act and they want to help. And I've often felt maybe somehow frustrated that as an individual, when I read about an issue that I'm really passionate about, but there's no way for me to be involved. So I read a campaign and I think, well, what can I do now? So I think this is also a great way in which Safe City app works, that it collects the data from individuals where they may have experienced harm or violence, and they can report something on the app, because it really helps you to do something, individual members of public, to do something about it. And of course, it's important to build coalitions with other civil society organizations, academics, but also in through the arts, through other disciplinaries, to really tackle the issue from a broad range of perspective. And engaging, of course, with regulators, both obvious and maybe not so obvious. So, of course, we engage with governmental committees, but we also engage with regulators and bodies such as the College of Policing, because we appreciate that governments might make the law, but it's the police that need to then enforce it and make sure they are trained to be able to address instances of online violence against women. And finally, there's always the opportunity to litigate in national, international courts. For members of the public, it may be an opportunity to sue the government if they've breached their rights. But for civil society organizations, there's always an opportunity to intervene in those judicial processes, whether nationally or in the European Court for Human Rights, for instance. So just before I conclude, I want to say a little bit of words beyond image-based sexual abuse, because of course I've outlined how the understanding of this issue has evolved and how we see progress, limited progress, but progress nonetheless in its addressing this issue. But what remains really quite fragmented is the approach to online violence against women overall, because the Online Safety Act had placed some types of image-based sexual abuse as priority offenses, but this ultimately kind of created this hierarchy that if online violence includes sexual images, then it's treated more serious than perhaps a stalking offense that includes only text-based abuse. And crucially, the study conducted by Professor Jurasz, the 4 Nations study, which I mentioned earlier, found that in fact 82% of respondents in the UK had experienced text-based violence, whereas only 33% experienced image-based violence. Yet the approach to image-based violence, despite how often it occurs, is still fragmented and does not capture the broad nature of these harms. And so, to conclude, there's currently the UK government on strategy on violence against women, and this is something that we're engaging in quite substantially, because we really want to place online violence against women beyond image-based sexual abuse within its mandate, and make sure that it plays a central part in the way it addresses violence against women generally. Also, within the center, we are currently working on a really interesting project where we are developing a coherent, cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral typology of online harms to address this fragmented approach to violence against women. And we're focusing on different themes. We're looking at definitional issues and understandings of violence against women. We want to explore lived experiences of online harms, as well as focus on how the definitions of online harms are used in practice, whether that's used in the courts or in legislative initiatives, as well as how are online violence understood in policing, in healthcare, as well as within tech and AI developers. So we really hope that this typology will influence the development of law and policy and design of new technologies and the tools in a way that's responsible, social, and ethical. But I think it's important to remember that our efforts in engaging governments on issues in relating to image-based sexual abuse or online harms must continue, and we must not lose sight of these issues, particularly in light of recent news that the UK might need to rethink some of the protections offered by Online Safety Act as it stands at the moment in order to negotiate a better deal with Trump administration. So we can already sense that potentially even those harms that are already protected to some extent could be under threat in the near future. So it's definitely an issue that we need to keep fighting for. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for listening, and I hope it's been a useful presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Ksenia. This was truly enlightening and very detailed. And what I took away from it is that survivor stories really help us understand the different forms of violence, whether it is in the digital format or even in the physical format. And that was a very interesting statistic, that you said that 82% of women experience text-based violent messages, but we place a lot of emphasis on the image-based. Not that to take away the seriousness of one or the other, but where do we focus, and data really helps us focus in implementing laws and implementing strong policies and preventing the violence. So thank you very much. We have a question from Gia. Have there been any major educational campaigns or other preventative measures developed to reduce or eliminate this form of violence against women? And I'll encourage everyone else also, if you have questions for Ksenia, I think Sylwia is still here, Rakesh is still here, JC is still here. So please put it in the chat.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of campaigns beyond image-based sexual abuse. For instance, the campaign by Glitch and EE and Refuge focused not on image-based sexual abuse, but focused on the fact that this bill that was being enacted, the Online Safety Act, did not address women at all. So it talked about broader issues than image-based sexual abuse. But I think there's space for more. There's definitely needs to be more campaigns. There needs to be more research, more data, more funding in this area in order to really understand the full extent of online violence and the way it can be tackled and effectively, not just from a legal perspective, but also from the policing perspective, from technological developments and ensuring that technology is equipped to to deal with this form of violence through safety by design, through making sure that the way AI is used is in a responsible way as well.
Thank you, Ksenia, for that answer. And a reminder, if you're in New York, please join us on Monday. We are going to continue this discussion. And the theme is technology in the age of AI. So as technology evolves, even the nature of the violence evolves. So we are always playing catch up with the law, but how can we be more agile is my question. Yeah, any other questions? I think Vaibhavi, you might have a question.
I was looking at all the work that you have done, and thank you so much for doing such brilliant work. I wanted to ask, when you do speak to people on research and you speak to the community members and take this data or understand what to do with this data, how do you build trust with the community to be able to speak to you about what is happening with them, and knowing that maybe there might be a possibility of this data converting into policy changes, or maybe it might not, or maybe it will, but in a very diluted form. So how do you take this conversation on a ground level, on a root level? That's what I wanted to understand.
Well, I'll do my best to answer it from my perspective of working in the academia and human rights organization. But then perhaps if Professor Jurasz wants to input how she's worked with partners on the Four Nations studies, you are welcome to do so. I think what we've been doing in the center specifically is that we're very conscious of our partners, and we really try to involve our partners in projects from very beginning phases. So, for example, with the current typology work, we've already gathered a workshop with our partners where numerous partners attended and asked them, well, this is the idea that we have. Tell us, is this going to be useful? Is this an issue that you're facing? Is this perhaps going to be helpful for survivors that you are representing? And we've been really impressed that a lot of them said yes, because at various levels of journey that victim survivors face, from the police, from the social media platforms, from the software developers, from the law, they face with different interpretations of what's happened to them, and also whilst dealing, for instance, with the removal policies. One social media platform might say, oh, this contradicts our policies, others might not. And also, even if it contradicts their policy, then acting to remove that content is a whole other step. So I think what we've been very conscious about is really involving partners in the co-creation of the design of the study. So before we even begun, we had a consultation, and it's something that we're going to continue doing as we progress with our work and constantly seeking their feedback. And we've hoped that, of course, after we build a typology, then we can potentially build trauma-informed toolkits and ensure that both software and developers, as well as victim organizations, have a say in how we shape the design of the typology and what would actually be useful. So that's the way that we've been working so far on the typology project. But I don't know if Olga has anything else to add regarding Four Nations study.
So the Four Nations study was a quantitative study. It was the largest survey that has been done on online violence against women in the UK. Over 7,800 participants were surveyed as part of that. So of course it was pretty much voluntary, and we used research panels to also get participants. I think in my experience, a lot of women are quite happy to speak out about their experiences online because of the vast normalization of what happens to just about every single one of us whenever we dare to speak up, dare to participate in online spaces, dare to have an opinion, or just go about our everyday business. Violence against women is an everyday business to women. I think I just want to be quite clear about that. I think the example that you mentioned about kind of building trust, I think especially if you're doing deeper studies with victims of violence and particularly gender-based violence, I think having that trauma-informed approach is absolutely crucial. And, building of trust is not something you build overnight. But I think we're also talking about building trust with other partners. So we talked about importance of networks and making sure that there is an element of co-creation. And this is something that really runs, I think, through and through our work in the center. Certainly over the time that I've engaged in work on topics of violence against women and women's online safety, I think I've seen far too many times co-creation being an afterthought rather than a starting point. I think we as I think academic community and researchers are starting to get better at that. I don't think we're there yet. But I think if you really take your time and think carefully about building relationship with networks, relationship with partners, I think Sylwia mentioned allies as well. It's important to know that not every partner is necessarily your ally, but that's a bigger conversation. So it's something to tread carefully around. You engage in a process that is much more productive. You are able to draw from such a pool of expertise, and your reach is so much wider. I genuinely have nothing bad to say, but to say, I think everybody should co-create. And I do believe in this cross-sectoral approach to tackling societal issues and violence against women and girls, especially its online and digital forms, is, I think, a prime example of why we do need those connections and why co-creation is so crucial from get-go.
Yes, I think, you hit the nail on the head, Olga. Co-creation is critical and it should be done right at the start. And we need diverse set of perspectives because this issue is far too big for any one of us to solve. It's too complex also for any one of us to solve. But I really enjoyed the discussion, and I think the chat also is on fire. Everybody's appreciated all the thoughts. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Sylwia. Thank you, Ksenia, Rakesh, JC. And of course, Olga, it's always great to collaborate and co-create with you. We too have another event on Monday together
That's right.
in New York. So safe travels. And those in New York, I put the details of our two events in the chat. Feel free to join us. It's a free event at the Church Center. It's going to be interesting discussions, and it's going to build on today's conversation, technology in the age of AI and how does it affect or improve women's safety. And then on Wednesday, with another partner, the University of Ottawa, we are talking about what can law and policy do. So please join us, and we are happy to co-create. So leave your emails in the chat section. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for excellent sharing, Elsa.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.